Good afternoon, everyone. It is 12 o'clock, and I'm one for being timely. And thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kim Adams, and I am an advocate and law graduate community legal aid. Today, in honor of Black History Month, we're going to explore issues dealing with Black health and wellness. And we are so excited today to have Dr. Carla McDay. She's a clinician and clinical psychiatric supportive treatment coordinator for the Minority Behavioral Health Group based out of Akron, Ohio. So throughout today's discussion, you can type questions in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat as we discuss, and we'll take time to respond to your questions several times during our discussion. So good afternoon, Carla. Could you give us just a little bit of information about yourself before we jump into our discussion today?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. I need to say that you are trying to speak my future into existence. I'm not a doctor yet. I am a licensed.
Hey, I'll speak it into existence. I will.
I am a licensed independent social worker with a master's degree in social work from the University of Akron. I have worked as a clinician at Minority Behavioral Health in the past. I've also worked at Greenleaf Family Services. Prior to that, I was 18 years a manager at Summit County Children's Services. So that is a little bit of my resume. It goes back a little further than that, but we won't get into the weeds of it.
Okay, so since we're going to talk about Black health and wellness, I'm going to start off with probably the softball question of the day. From your purview, what do you think are the biggest health challenges that the Black community faces today?
Right now, given that today is what it is, we have just sort of come through or are coming to the close of the COVID pandemic. So I think that would be one of the major health problems. Then we have disparities with life expectancy. Of course, we have heart disease, diabetes, HIV and AIDS, and the list goes on, but also infant mortality and mental health. All of those are some of the disparities that we're facing.
So, I mean, one of the things that I think that the COVID pandemic brought out were these disparities. Of course, people who are clinicians, people, who work in public policy, people who even work in legal services and other quote unquote helping professions understood that there were disparities. Can you kind of talk about, since this new focuses on racism is a public health crisis, how can you bring that full circle into dealing with the disparities that the Black community deals with as far as health access?
Okay. I think that what we have to understand is that historically, many African Americans in the United States have been faced with challenges of course, racism and discrimination, but if we go all the way back, terrorism and brutality of slavery. These systems were not just sort of developed, but they were condoned and in some cases made legal to discriminate against African American people. So many systems from a systematic perspective do not have and were not intended to meet the needs of African Americans. And the healthcare system is just one of those systems. It's really unfortunate today that we're still talking about whether or not we should have anti-lynching legislation. Like, why is that an issue? Today, we're still battling in Louisiana. They had a heated battle about the naming of public schools, such as, Robert E. Lee, and how systems are in place to sort of honor and reverence this brutality that we've been faced with. So it's not a part of these systems, and nor were these systems designed to sort of incorporate or to try to improve the condition of Black people.
And I think a lot of times we buy into the fact that maybe because we've progressed a little bit, that things are going to always get better, or that systems were not put in place for us to progress. Or if it was simply so we could, I guess, lack of a better term, is to help those but not help ourselves. So for example, with, experimentation, whether it was, Tuskegee, with the syphilis and other type of experimentation on Black and brown individuals, we would be told, oh, this is going to help you, wink, wink. And on the other side, no, no, it wasn't going to help you. What it was going to do is it was going to help my research, and it was going to kill your children or sterilize you on behalf of research that would never help, your community. And so I think that knowing the history behind a lot of these things has really helped us. But do you think that the more history we learn about disparities in health affect the way we look at COVID vaccination statuses, et cetera?
Absolutely. I think that there is this overall overarching mistrust. Oftentimes, African Americans describe their interactions with the healthcare system as one in which they come away feeling invalidated. They feel as though they weren't heard. They are also fearful. And you have to understand that if a dominant culture, if we were to go all the way back, if a dominant culture had a people here to basically prosper and thrive off of their work and labor, they were not intended to ensure that these people were well taken care of beyond their ability to help the dominant culture prosper and thrive. So I think that there is this mistrust in the system because there has not been a time really in history where our health, our wellness has been of interest to anyone outside of their ability to sort of come up as a result of it.
And we also, and because of that, again, our health is the health that suffers. It's not their health, it's our health that suffers. And then if you put us in areas of employment, et cetera, we are the ones that the society or the economy, our backs hold that up. But when our backs are broken from holding that up, then we're disparaged, we're fired, we're called lazy because we want to try to take care of ourselves. And then we're at a crossroads because we don't know what to do. You want us to do X, Y, and Z in order for us not to be seen as not wanting to take care of ourselves. But when we speak up and try to take care of ourselves or need that day off or what have you, we're the first ones that are probably going to get fired because we might not have insurance, or because we've, been turned away or not listened to. We're not going to go to the doctor. And we're not going to try to figure out what's wrong with us. So, as far as health concerns that you may see as working in mental health, what do you think are the challenges for Black Americans to acknowledge the trauma, the stress, the need to not buy into, pray about it? When it comes to mental health, and just expound on that a little bit to how we can be more opening to access on a intergenerational level from kids, because this is really affecting kids now to seniors, all across the spectrum.
I think that one of the things I like to say is that as African Americans, we do have a responsibility. There's a responsibility on us not to look at our circumstances and to be discouraged or feel as though there is no way up or no way out. What you have to realize is that there has been indeed a psychological impact. We've seen increased anxiety, increased depression, stress and trauma, domestic violence. These are all things that have recently, especially in COVID, been highlighted. And then, of course, there's a grief and loss of losing so many loved ones. But we have a responsibility to know our history, okay? Because I think that that is so fundamental and foundational. You have to know who you are. And once you can sort of grasp who you are, then you'll find that there are these nuggets of resiliency that are a part of our culture think about everything that we have been through, the heroin epidemic, the crack epidemic, Jim Crow, now Jim Crow 2.0. We have had one after another of these sort of blows, but every time the African American community can come back. And what we are losing sight of is what has given us that ability to come back. And it is African-centered values and remembering who we are, honoring God, the creator, honoring our ancestors, having this ability to kind of be interconnected and to offer support to one another. I think we've started to buy into values that were not initially ours, like individualism and competition. We need to sort of come together. And so our strength in the past had always been in our unity and our ability to unify. That has been destroyed. The family unit has been under attack, and you know that for many years. We need to come back to the middle, come back to who we were and who we are.
I think, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. I know that my age, and I'm not going to tell it today,
All right.
we, it was family, it was community, and family was more than your nuclear family. And I think that is something that, is disparaged in some way. And I think it's become disparaged because people of the majority want to tell you what your family is supposed to be. 2.5 people, a dog, a fence, a house, and that's supposed to be your family. Whereas your family can be your aunties, your uncles, your cousins, the lady down the street that when your mother told you that if she says something, I'm gonna believe her first and I'm gonna get you and then I'll ask questions later.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing that we've started to gravitate away from, as you said, because we are so, I don't know the best term to use. I don't want to say that we've been brainwashed, but I guess that might be the best one to use at times, that our culture doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Or that storytelling doesn't matter. Because one of the things about our culture and our history, the way it's been passed down is through stories, and how, this family member, how they did these things and how the family has progressed through, or how the community has progressed through, that has brought that sense of resilience to us. And we've stopped telling these stories to our kids, whether they be our natural children or whether they be the kid down the street. And I don't know, if that's because we think they don't want to hear them, or we don't know how to communicate properly intergenerationally, or what that may be. But I think that we've lost the ability to share our stories and share our triumphs because we see so much in media about the bad.
Mm-hmm. That is absolutely correct. And all I can say is I agree. We've lost some of our fabric. It used to be that when people wanted to start a new initiative, whatever initiative in the community, and if they wanted to reach the African American community, they had this ability to go first to the churches and then to the beauty salons and the barbershops. But even now, church attendance is down drastically. People aren't coming to church. We aren't remembering those things that helped us to get over, help us to get through. And so now that we're losing some track of our own Afrocentric values and buying into values of the dominant culture that are not set up for us to compete. So if you buy into, materialism, and you're in a culture where you don't have the same access to education or material wealth, then you end up frustrated and discouraged. And sometimes people turn to things that are unethical or illegal in an effort to try to get ahead and keep up with the Joneses, so to speak, where we really need to keep up with our own community and return to our own values.
So when you focus on that, what type of intentional focuses can we look at dealing with Black health and wellness that can put us in a place of honoring who we are, what we bring to the table,
Mhm.
and how to expand that forward to our community and to the greater society.
I think it's just centering for us right now, coming back to what we know some of our values are. It may not be for everyone to return to church in its traditional sense, but to return to family. That could be a good starting point. Return to meditation, return to prayer, get back to self-care. Be careful of what you are ingesting uh, in the media and physically as well. Be careful what you take in. Guard your ear gates, guard your eye gates. I think a lot of what is wrong with us has to do with media and this messaging and this imaging that we constantly get that sort of pulls us away from who we are, who we are.
And I think that media has deepened our trauma, especially these last, I don't know, these last 2 years. You know, one of the things that I really try not to do is watch any video of any kind of violence against, someone in the Black community. And not to say that I look at it for anybody, I try not to watch it for anybody, but especially because it's so traumatic every single time you have to see it. And then it becomes traumatic again when nothing is done. And then it becomes traumatic again when it happens again and again and again. And people, we just don't know how to process the layers upon layers of trauma that happened to us. And we've been told, I remember as a young person, you don't deal with mental health. What's mental health? No, you get over it. You get over it and you move on. And I think that has been um, hard for us to be able to deal with. And then now, we have people that are understanding. You got to take care of yourself, self-care. Because who did self-care back in the day? Who did self-care? So it's really hard for us to try to put ourselves in that space. So do you have suggestions on how can we get ourselves in a better space to understand that self-care is important, not just to, I guess, continue the fight for the things that we want our community to advance to, but just for our own, well-being?
Suggestions that I might have, especially as it relates to the clinical, because that question was loaded, but from a clinical perspective and seeing someone to deal with mental health, we'll start there. I think that what we know about African Americans and mental health was there was a stigma, first of all, associated with it by your family, but then there was also mistrust of these practitioners. Oftentimes walking into an office and trying to identify or speak to someone who does not look like you or have that shared experience is very difficult. So then when there were not many African-American therapists or options to get a therapist that looked like you, that could have a shared common experience with you, then what we saw was this premature termination. People didn't want to go back to therapy, and then they were often overdiagnosed and over pathologized, and then you would get the stigma of being someone with a mental illness rather than being someone who was really struggling with something as simple as adjusting to the aggression, the microaggressions, the oppression that you suffer every day. This oppression in and of itself, I always think it's so interesting that the mantra for the Black Lives Matters movement, some of what you hear behind that is always, I can't breathe. And it's so interesting to me that really sometimes microaggressions and oppression make you feel like you can't breathe. It is so difficult when you have to deal with on the job negative comments, going to your local retailer and being followed through the store or whatever it is. It is difficult to breathe under that oppressive system because you constantly feel as though something is pressing on you. Someone is watching, you are somehow mistrusted, and then you have this mistrust for the system. So it is difficult to breathe under that. I don't know if I answered the question because I want to start talking about something else, but To your point, I feel as though African Americans, from mental health perspective, need practitioners that look like them and who can relate to them. What they can do in terms of self-care and taking care of themselves is returning to, I think a lot of it has to do with turning off some of the media, but returning to where we were. There used to be a time where we could have a good time with family in a room, without media, without anything, sitting on the front porch. We just used to bond. I think that some of that is missing, and our bonding now is all around materialism and rituals that involve spending. We need to get back to some of our more natural and organic connections.
I agree. I'm going to deviate to a question that we have in the chat, and then I'm going to come back to what you just expounded on. So we have a question about how can we connect our community to more supportive services? I know we have them. How do we do a better job as service providers and community advocates to connect people as well as meet them where they are?
I think one of my favorite ways to do that is create, and especially in the African American community, sort of a clearinghouse. We need a place. We have a 211, we have a 911. We need a place where we can kind of have a centralized focus of resources for the African American community. I think there are a lot of programs that are siloed, and we need to sort of come together and have one area where we can figure out what the resources are and direct people in the proper direction so that they can get what they need. I don't know if that answers the question, but please feel free to come back in the chat. But I would love to see a clearinghouse, a place where we could have a centralized African American information center.
I agree with that. I think that it's very I think it's needed also, from the perspective of legal services. I think that one of the problems that we have is connection. There are times when even I've gone out into the community and, people are like, well, you have X degree and you have this, that, and the other, and you really don't understand where we're coming from. And I think that when we start to get out, and number one, get out in the community and show ourselves in the community and not go out there and think we have all the answers, become better listeners of because the community is where the action is. We're just coming in to be individuals that can potentially either advocate for individuals or communities if that's what they need, or empower them to stand up for themselves. I think that sometimes we're so busy trying to run in there and be Superman or Superwoman instead of taking what the community has and helping them build on top of it. Again, like I said, we don't have all the answers, but we have to be seen. We can't just be, coming in when, this is my favorite thing, we can't just be coming in when we want grant money, okay? We can't just be coming in when we want something. We have to be there all the time. We have to at least have a presence. I'm not saying all of us can be there, but we have to at least have an intentional presence to want to be a part of a community. So I wish we really could get that type of clearinghouse together. But another concern that I have is that, people may say, well, you all are trying to take away from, somebody else. That's always the thing. We've given you something. How are you going to try to take it from somebody else? Well, because we didn't have it. And it wasn't, as you said earlier, it was never intended for us. It was never intended for us. So when we start to band together, come together for these clearinghouses, there's always question. There's always, well, what's the ulterior motive? None. The motive is to help our people.
Mm-hmm.
So I really, I wish we could do something like that. So I hope that it does answer the question. Ms. Davis, if you want to ask something else with that, please feel free to do so in the chat. But I might have lost my thought. I know we were talking about, I can't even remember what you were talking about. So I did lose my train of thought beforehand. But I think also what I want to talk about, something that we don't talk about a lot, are kids. We won't talk a lot about kids. And I know we were talking before we got on, with your other passion, which is youth, and your other position that you had, which was with Summit County. So as far as health challenges, mental health challenges, et cetera, with children and youth, what can we do as, I don't want to say older, I don't want to say seasoned, because some of them, are more, well-rounded than we are, but what do we do to support them in their quest to become healthy,
I
to
think a
become
lot
well?
of I think a lot of it has to do with protection, like protecting them and protecting their youth. Do you remember when we used to have an opportunity to allow children to be children? Children are exposed and overexposed right now to so many things that they are not yet ready for. And you have to understand that there are phases and stages to psychological development, just like physical development, you know? You don't give popcorn to an infant. And I think the same is true when you watch media. I think a lot of parents are using media, social media, sometimes to exploit their children or to put them out there a little more so than they need to be, or also using media to babysit their children. And you have to be careful about what images these children are seeing very early on. There's an African proverb that says, there's a danger to having your dinner for breakfast. There's a reason why you don't have dinner for breakfast. You're not quite ready for it yet. Sometimes you can't get things too fast. And I think we need to protect our children and allow them to be children.
I agree. And a lot of time, because it's easier. One of the things I like to say sometimes is that we lack the mental capacity to do hard things. Mm-hmm. And one of the hard things that we have to do is that we have to be available. We can't just put a kid in front of a Kindle and say, okay, now you can watch. I mean, it's okay now, Coleman. I think that's the one that my niece likes, is Coleman. But in moderation, because what are they learning the best from? You helping them read a story. You taking the time to be intentional about sitting with a child, whether it's your child, a niece, a nephew, or whatever, and spending quality time with them, teaching them, how to read a whistle for Willie, mm-hmm. Taking them for walks, teaching them about birds, taking them to museums, sitting there and coloring. I know that we're busy. I mean, we're all busy. Society is just really busy. But sometimes we really do have to slow down. And it's hard for me to do. I'm getting a little bit better at it. But slow down and take in stuff. Take in what your environment is showing. Take into what your kids are saying to you before they say it to somebody else and get in trouble. So I really believe that's true, that we just really need to take the time. And this leads into a question that's in the chat. One of the attendees is talking about, they had a Black History Month presentation, and one of the items that they were talking about are more Black male positive role models. And I know that being a member of the Divine Nine, that we have, fraternities that, show up and everything, but where do we find that? Because I know that there are young men, and boys that need that. Sometimes mama can't do it. Sometimes I can't do it. Where do we cultivate that? And not just in education, but in mental health and in other areas. So our Black young men and boys know that they matter and are appreciated.
I think the Divine Nine is an excellent place to start. It is very difficult. Again, it's about busy and it's about being overwhelmed. Some of it is overwhelmed, again, with this desire to sort of prosper and to take care of oneself and their family, and that kind of individual attitude. What used to happen was we had community. and community centers. And, there were African-American men around, not just the football coach. We have to get beyond that. And we need life coaches at this point, and good examples and good role models. But oftentimes I think that people are so bogged down with survival and being in the tyranny of the moment, especially as it relates to poverty. We have to find the people who are established, like those men in the Divine Nine, who are doing well, who have their careers, and encourage them to give back. We really do.
I remember, what I was going to ask you about, and you were talking about therapists that look like you. And I mean, I know that for me, that is huge because, you can, and really, in a lot of areas, we're more comfortable once we have that trust, because once that trust is broken, to be quite honest, I don't care if you're black, brown, orange, or blue, there's gonna be some type of tension there until you know that that person is intentionally there for you. So how do you suggest that we go about finding more or developing more Black professionals in mental health and wellness?
I think people, we probably have to start at the universities and looking for people who have that as their genuine interest. But also there needs to be space in the education system for programs that are accredited to recognize and understand that there is a mental model, one that we work with at Minority Behavioral Health, called Optimal Conceptual Theory by Dr. Linda James Myers, that helps us understand how best to practice with African American people. We have a very different set of circumstances, and you cannot take the blanketed sort of Eurocentric mindset towards psychology and just frame it and sort of place it over, in Black people's lives. We need our own practitioners, again, that look like us, that have that shared experience, and who can be relatable. It is very different, the African American experience. It's not one like any other, and I do mean that, like any other. So we need programs to understand the value in it. And then we need practitioners who are truly interested and talented in that area, who want to give back. But that's what we would need. We need programs to recognize and people who want to do the work, and it is work.
And we have a follow-up comment. Do you think that we should start earlier? Do you think that we maybe should start starting to bring that into the high school level, into trying to get kids to understand that they can be who they want to be? Because I think that's a barrier too. Where kids, we try to silo again. Oh, well, you'll be successful if you be a doctor. Oh, you'll be successful if you'll be a lawyer. We try to silo people into certain professions because we have the mindset that that's where success is. Versus saying you can be successful in being an entrepreneur. You can be successful in being whoever you want to be.
Akron Public Schools currently has an initiative where they're helping expose ninth graders, 7th, 8th, and 9th graders, specifically, I know at Ennis Middle School, to different careers and career paths. So they are definitely making some efforts within the school system to expose children to different career paths so that they have information and they have opportunities to meet professionals from different walks of life so that they can choose. So that is in the works.
So I want to go back to another point that that you brought up about microaggressions and not being valued. So as individuals and in various professions, helping professions, your profession, working in minority behavioral health, my profession in the legal profession, medicine, etc. We deal with a lot of intentional and unintentional microaggression. And it's very difficult to try to explain that, when the trauma of it is continuous. So from your perspective at now I'm talking about, individual professionals. For our self-care and for our well-being, how do we make employers, communities, individuals, not make them understand, but make it more apparent that those types of behaviors stifle our growth, make us want to not be a part of the profession, and make us leery of anyone who may be trying to put a positive face on the fact that they understand or empathize with, because they'll never understand, but empathize where we're coming from.
I think you're doing it now. You have to have discussions and you just have to be candid and honest. Sometimes I think you opened up well when you said sometimes microaggressions are intentional, but sometimes they're unintentional. People don't have our shared experience. They don't understand that something that they might find funny or just say off the cuff is hurtful. So you have to just be patient. I think that we have to be patient with people, patient with one another, and be able to talk through, hey, you said this today or this happened, and I want you to understand it from this perspective. Try to look at it through my lens, my worldview, so that maybe you can see it. And then if you are patient and willing and open, they'll share it with you through their worldview that perhaps they didn't mean anything by it. But we have to be I think caring and patient and kind to one another. We have to make space and give grace. People don't know. We are just now to the place where we're starting to openly have these conversations, and it's wonderful because everywhere you want to go, everyone wants to talk diversity, equity, inclusion. This is great. I'm happy. We can finally at least act like, the elephant isn't in the room. But at the same time, we have to be open to being receptive and understanding other people's perspective. Oftentimes I'll hear people say, we have this negative historical context from which we come, but the people who feel as though they're living and working and moving amongst us today don't really feel any onus or guilt about that. They don't feel like I was there, for that, in the Jim Crow era, or I was there in the slavery era. It's not something that I did to you. It's not something personal to me. But I think that I had a professor in college who said it this way: one of the things you have to understand is this is almost as though there were a race, and he gave us a visualization of a race, and starting at the beginning line and actually having the referee fire the gun and giving one gentleman 300 years to get ahead, and then telling the next one after 300 years, now you can go. We're about 400 years behind now, and it's difficult for us to catch up. It's difficult for us to understand, and there's a lot of wealth and a lot of things that have been built on the backs of our ancestors who didn't have an opportunity to get in the race, that now we have to sort of contend with. So we have to be patient, we have to be kind, and while people don't understand how structural racism has contributed to where we are today, we got to help them understand that and give them grace for not knowing, I think.
So I guess I'll play devil advocate for that a bit. So when you have to give grace for this, because it's understood for the most part, what do you do when you get tired of giving grace? What do you do?
That's a difficult one. I mean, I feel like at that point you're at a crossroad, and that has to be an individual decision. It depends on, where you are as a person, a professional, where you are in a situation. If you just are at the end and you know that it's become not healthy for you, then you need to move on. What they say is peace is expensive, but it's well worth it. So go find some peace somewhere.
And I think too, and that was why I asked that, because I think that sometimes people will somewhat chastise individuals when they need to take a break. And sometimes that break is the best thing that can happen, not just for your self-care and awareness, but also for you to come back into the fight another day. Because there are some people who feel like you got to constantly be on that hamster wheel of every situation. You got to be there. It's you got to be there. I had to learn that, and I'm like, no, I'm I'm gonna take a break right now because there's more of people that look like me, and you can get with them for a minute. Because if I don't take a break, then I'm not gonna be well for myself. And like you said, peace is expensive. I'm like, take care of your peace of mind,
Mhm.
because there's always gonna be something. But that also contributes to our health outcomes too. If we don't take care of that peace of mind piece, I don't care how much money you make. I don't care how many raises you get. You can't spend that money 6 feet under.
Mm-mm. No, you have to
You
take
can't
care of
spend.
yourself. You have to take care of yourself and you have to prioritize. And that goes back to values. Again, I keep talking about African-centered values, but what do you value? What's important to you? You know, what can you do? Is it your goal just to get ahead financially at all costs? And I've seen people, trying to get ahead financially and just move up the ladder at any cost. And it takes so much damage and toll on their lives, on their families' lives, on their health. And you can't do that. So you have to move to a place where you are taking care of yourself. And a lot of what the values include is again, it's family, it's God, it's your spiritual, your physical, your mental health, and kind of coming back and centering yourself, meditation, prayer, things that are going to bring you some peace in the midst of all of this. And you have to pull away. Is the most important thing when considering a job, how much money you will make? Or is it your enjoyment? How much you gonna like it? Can you help someone?
Right. And I think too that when you were saying about, again, we'll come back to, therapists and other practitioners, providers that look like you. That's where you find that space to be able to, I think, I can only speak for me. That's where I've been able to find that space to be able to really hone in on those type of values, that type of centering, where I'm not really worried about the money. I'm not really looking for the money, because if I was looking for the money, I would be doing what I was doing before I came here. So I'm really looking for that connection with the community. I'm really looking for that place where I have time to do other things. And I'm really looking at that place where I can lift someone up to maybe be where I am, or maybe further than where I am. And that's where we come back again to community, because that's what it used to be. People used to say, you know what, you can be whoever you want to be. You got to do the work. You have to do the work, even if there's barriers. And I think too, sometimes we focus on the barriers. And somebody just told me this a couple days ago. We focus on the problem instead of the solution. We focus on the problem instead of, what positive may have come from it, or what did you learn from the problem. We forget sometimes that we can learn from bad things. We can put them behind us, but it's also a stepping stone. And I think that we don't value that sometimes, where, we might have had a problem, we might have had a bad experience, but because society says, okay, bad experience, you're not worthy. That's self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we, and I'm going to end on this point. How do we develop self-worth to enhance our health and our wellness? How do we, as Black folk, develop our self-worth despite the odds, despite the barriers? How do we do that?
Now, I'll go back to my previous answer. It has a lot to do with knowing yourself, know thyself, knowing your history, understand that your history predates slavery. Go back and understand who we are and why there is an Egyptology, why they do study the pyramids and the things that we have done, and who were the first scientists and who were the first astrologers. You have to go back and understand who you are, and then you will have an intrinsic self-worth that is not based on exterior criteria or external criteria. You don't need all of those things. And what the media, that's why I keep going back to the media, tells you is that you are okay once you get a Lexus. You are okay once you live on this street. I'm okay anyway. And what we used to know for sure was that we were okay anyway. We took pride in that. and we walked high and we held our heads high, not beaten down because society says that you didn't do this or you didn't do that. We are descendants of kings and queens. And as long as somebody can help you not understand or take away your understanding or your foundation and your roots, and you don't know who you are, then you are in trouble. So what we need to do is go back and figure out who we are. And then the intrinsic self-worth, the fact that you are here and that you are a divine being and God made you, our self-worth, we used to connect it and understand it in that way. Now we understand it from an exterior or external criterion. And it's just detrimental. I have a quote by Marcus Garvey, and it says this, and I can end on this. It's in my office, and it says, if the Negro is not careful, he will drink in all of the poison of Western civilization and surely die of its effects. It will kill you if you keep looking at things from a perspective that is not ours intrinsically. That is not how we really view the world, to be competitive. To try to get ahead at the expense of other people. Some things that go along with capitalism and along with this societal structure in which we've been introduced are not intrinsically ours.
I would agree and go back again to storytelling. You know, we've got all these people who want to take our history away. Why do they want to take our history away? Because they know that we're powerful people. They know we're powerful people. And one of the you know things that I wish for a lot of people, you know, if you haven't, and you know, if you can, go to Egypt, because I'm telling you right now, you'll see it. I mean, we developed so many things, but we have allowed people to say that we're secondary. We've allowed people to get into our minds and say we're less than when we know better. Because what my mother says, when you know better, you do better. And it's up to you, as you said, that we need to have the responsibility. We can't, you know, we don't need Google. We got us. We don't need Google. You know, we have descendants that, yes, you can use Google to start your process. But for me, the best part about it is that I want to talk to my mother, you know, who knew when she ran track that they couldn't go to the bathroom, that they had to stop on the side of the road. You know, people who had to pick cotton, people who know what that's like. That's firsthand knowledge. That's not Google. That's firsthand knowledge. And then that takes us back further and further and further from whence we came. You know, so I am so happy that I was able to talk to you, Carla, and I'm speaking into existence your doctorate, because that I'm speaking it right now. Speaking.
All right.
So, but thank you, everyone. We're ending here. So thank you so much for spending your lunch with us. And you know, we will host these big ideas discussions every month to shed light on, you know, topics that are deal with our clients and other issues that can help them enrich their lives. And you can stay on top of those type of discussions and our big ideas. We also write articles for our big ideas. You can stay on top of those discussions in social media and also on our webpage, www.communitylegalaid.org. You can follow us on Facebook, on LinkedIn. I think we're on Instagram and on Twitter. So thank you so much for following us. And until next time, stay safe, stay well, and stay warm, because the snow is coming.